It is currently the 3rd of February 2023. It's a Friday, and here in Cusco it has been cloudy, foggy, drizzly, and rainy and cold all day. So that's the deal. I've been getting updates from my sobrina as she is headed for Ollantaytambo for the weekend. And I am not headed anywhere, like, at all right now, because yesterday I slipped on the top step of the stairs and fell all the way down, and got a whole pile of really nasty bruises. So I am, a little bit laid up at the moment. Let's see. So yesterday, the 2nd was called to be a major national protest day, and there certainly were a lot of marches past the apartment and everything, including a police parade. So here's some footage of that. The police parade has been met with varying opinions. Some people are like, well, that sure is a good parade, and other people are like, yeah, go police, and other people are like, okay, so why are you doing parades when not that far away there were, disturbances in need of police intervention, like in near the La Canasta supermarket in Santa Monica, right by Magisterio, sort of more upscale neighborhoods of Cusco. There was open brawling in the street, apparently between possible protesters and people who just live in the area. And this is one of the reasons why, sort of historically, it's been more common to see police accompany protesters so that, a street brawl doesn't break out or whatever, so that nobody throws rocks at protesters. Protesters can't throw rocks at anybody else. Nobody can invade the protest sphere and throw rocks and blame anybody else, and all of that sort of thing. And that has not so much been the case this time around. So who knows? As far as the news, roadblocks, yesterday everything was blocked in and out of Cusco, absolutely everything. and there were lots of roadblocks within Cusco too, but there were some reports of clearing roadblocks and further out areas and so forth. And as my sobrina, my niece, is making her voyage from Cusco to Ollantaytambo this afternoon, she's been sending me videos periodically and reporting where roadblocks have been cleared that have been there for some time, and what the status of the roads is like, and all of that kind of stuff. So we at present expect her to make a peaceful and uneventful transit all the way through on the shorter route to Ollantaytambo, which is normally 90 minutes, but I think it's more like 2 hours right now. Anyway, the key thing there is that the main pass, that's an entrance and exit out that way out of Cusco at the Arco Tica Tica, is clear. And the general thinking has been throughout the course of all these protests that Saturdays and Sundays are open days, truce days, kind of, where people can get around and go do what needs to get done. And so the hope is that that will continue. But it is concerning, and we can't say for sure that we expect that to continue, because I would say emotions are starting to get more heated, especially as Congress continues to hear more proposals for moving up elections and then voting them down. And there are all kinds of reasons why any group of Congress people would vote for or against any of these particular bills that have been proposed. And really good answers to those questions probably depend on a lengthy understanding of 50, 60 years minimally of Peruvian politics. And so that's tough, right? It's really tough to gather all that information, and then it's hard to be neutral and have informed perspectives about all of that stuff as well, if you do have all of that information and all of that background. So, that becomes tricky. My major objective in making all of these videos, like I say, is to give people a fairly clear picture of what the situation is like if you're actually here in Cusco, or if you are thinking of coming here or expecting to come here, or you have plans already in process. So I'm gonna try to answer a couple of questions that have come in via comments on the YouTube channel, and see where that goes for today. And so one of them is from 4 days ago, and it is from Jason, who is in Urubamba, who says, greetings from Urubamba, and thanks so much for your videos. I find them informative, and it seems you're trying to be objective about this complex situation. Much appreciated. I really am trying to be objective, and it's not the easiest thing to do, because there's so much information sort of flying around all over the place, but I'm really trying to just, put out basic information. Anyway, Jason says, I have 2 questions, and I would love if you could shed some light on these. Number 1, roadblocks. Here in the valley, the Sacred Valley, these have been sporadic, and it seems like when the protests gain steam, the roads get blocked, especially on weekends and before lunchtime, but then at least one lane is cleared by the afternoon or within a day or 2 tops, and traffic flows normally again. What's the logic there? I would think if locals really wanted the roads to be off limits, they would protect these roadblocks and not let anyone clear them. Why do they bother blocking the road if they then just let things clear within 48 hours? Okay, well, this is an excellent question with some complex answers. And one thing to consider is that if people are staffing a roadblock, potentially that is an arrestable situation. And so people don't necessarily always want to be arrested at the scene of blocking a road. That's been bad news historically in the past sometimes. Another thing is that is a potential situation that can escalate into violence, and people don't want that. They do want to disrupt transit, but they don't want to actually cause violence and injury, to themselves or to anybody else. So they're not trying to be there, for the most part, waiting for a fight to break out, waiting for police to show up, the military to show up, a caravan of people coming through in vehicles who don't agree with the roadblock, a lot of different things. So the whole idea is this road is blocked, and it's going to at least be disruptive to the regular flow of traffic. So that's one thing. That's one sort of thing. As to when roadblocks are staffed and when they are called for and that kind of thing, it's generally fairly grassroots, as to if people are going to go block a road in a specific area and the whole thing. But it depends very much. So for instance, the blocking of bridges in Puno, for example, we have seen like organized schedules put out by union leaders talking about who has the responsibility to watch and staff that roadblock at different times of day, on different calendar days, and a lot of that kind of stuff. So it is not consistent. In some cases, a roadblock may simply be the people who live near there cutting down some trees and dragging some really big rocks out. And in other cases, it may be something that people have decided to do in a really strategic way about all of that kind of stuff. I would say that yes, in the Sacred Valley, it seems like when there is a day that has been convened to be a protest day, roadblocks get put up, and then people don't continue to staff them, and then things get opened further along, right? So further along in the day. So it really does vary, and it does depend. It does depend a fair bit. So what's the logic to just disrupting the flow of traffic? Well, the idea is, with a paro, which is a strike, a work stoppage and stoppage of everything, the idea is that everything is supposed to stop. The idea is to make everything grind to a halt so that people are forced to pay attention to the demands of the protesters. That's the strategic idea. Whether one agrees with it or not. Roadblocks are not intended to be things that are causing risk to people's lives or to property even. They're just intended to be, a disruption in transportation. Now, obviously, we have seen some more serious, no joke, roadblocks where people have been staffing them round the clock and saying, absolutely not, you can't get through, doesn't matter who you are or why. And then in some cases, roadblocks are staffed so that there are always people there who can say, all right, we're going to clear things away for this ambulance to get through, and stuff like that. But yeah, so there's that. One thing that is definitely against the law is for people to set up roadblocks and then say, oh yeah, well there's pay some money and we'll let you through. That is definitely against the law. So yeah. So why do they bother blocking the road if they then just let things clear within 48 hours? Well, so it also takes resources to send out government workers or police to have them clearing roads, and so that means that that is a form of action as well. So why bother forcing police to go out and clear roads? Well, to force them to go out and clear roads instead of potentially doing other things is one thought, and also because then the government has to take note of the fact that those things are happening. Okay. Jason also asks about organization. This may be the million-soul question, but could you speak a bit about who actually organizes these protests? They're obviously coordinated, but by whom? Local union groups, right? Political party leaders? How much say do the local population get in when and where and what is going to happen? How do these decisions get made? Well, so sort of what happens for the most part is, it kind of depends to an extent, but it is generally union groups, and they can be national union groups, they can be local union groups, they can be groups of specific workers, they can be groups of people from a specific community, and generally speaking, they will have meetings, and they'll pass around word to everybody who is a member of the association or community or affiliated or what have you, and they're going to have a meeting to discuss all those sorts of things, and then everybody agrees or doesn't agree or whatever ends up happening to conduct the protest actions, what they will be, where they will take place, and what time. And then the people who are formally known as leaders of those community groups or those unions or whatever they may be, you know, everybody who runs the local market, you know, that kind of thing, then they usually publish a statement which goes out. It's kind of like a press release, and it goes out all around social media and is delivered to like local radio and other kinds of stuff. And it says, you know, we are convoking, vamos a convocar protestas. We are calling for protests to happen on this date at this time in this place, and here's what it looks like, and here's what we're working for. And over the past few years, there have been a lot of sort of general population complaints that people are not organizing and coordinating these well, because everybody who is a union leader or who is ready to go out and protest isn't coordinating to do it everywhere all at the same time. So then some people feel like these protests are not as effective as they could be and don't get the job done, and a lot of that kind of stuff, and they'd like to see there be more coordination and more organization, but it is a little bit tricky. Another thing that happens is that people start talking in their social spaces. That can be social media, it can be regular ongoing meetings and events, and, you know, going to market. It can be calling into the local news radio talk shows and stuff like that, and talking about what what they're calling for and that kind of stuff. And then things really do sort of form that way. And then individual groups get together and say, all right, well, we are forming a delegation, and we are the delegation of these people from this organization, and we are marching along. Like, for example, there was one group of protesters a week or two ago who was not large, and they marched with their banner that said that they were from the Association of Graphic Designers. And so they just said, all right, well, we're going to go out and we're going to take to the streets as well, and we're going to do this. And so we are adhering to this. And so generally the news will say, all right, well, the transport union has agreed to uphold the strike. And so that means that there will not be servicio urbano. For example, none of the Cusco city buses are going to run on this day, like yesterday was one of those days. And then the union of taxi drivers will say, all right, we also agree we are going to uphold it. And then there's always going to be a few people who are taxi drivers who are like, screw that, I'm driving anyway, I'm going to make money while I can. And so then that's kind of interesting how that sort of stuff happens. Or you might have a business, an entire business, and that business says, we are agreeing to uphold the strike and participate in the strike action, and that kind of stuff. So with the question of how much say do the local population get in when and where and what is going to happen, it's really variable. So let's say you could have a small town, and pretty much everyone in the small town gets together and goes to the town meeting and agrees that they are going to block the road that runs through their small town, and that they establish a schedule, and they do it. And in that case, the majority of people in that small town of, you know, a couple hundred people or whatever have had a chance to have their say and have their input and so forth. On the other hand, when you get to something like everybody who lives in Santa Monica or Magisterio, the more, you know, upscale neighborhoods in Cusco, it's pretty much guaranteed that a large number of those people who are residents there are not part of labor unions. They have white-collar jobs that are maybe not union jobs. They may simply have inherited wealth. They may work internationally, a lot of different kind of stuff like that. And so they're probably not part of, you know, the bus drivers union or anything like that. And they may not have strong roots or connections in the more rural communities. And so those folks don't have much say in whether or not people from the Sacred Valley come into Cusco to march up and down Avenida de la Cultura. And so so that becomes another very different thing. So why do protests go certain routes in certain ways in certain places? Well, usually because those are high visibility places in Cusco, and so they want to be seen, and also they want to impede the flow of regular traffic and disrupt things so that people have to notice what's going on. Because the theory is that if people know what's happening, then they will support the cause. Then they are more likely to support the cause. And that it is also a flexing of the political power that the population can have, that el pueblo can have, that the people can have, right? I would say that right now in Peru, we are seeing those assumptions really be challenged, because it's very clear that Congress right now doesn't care what the majority of Peru wants, which is, according to all the reputable polls that have been done, to see elections moved up at some point. And that's maybe to 2024, that's maybe to sometime this year, various different times this year. And so we know that that is something that most of the population of Peru is actually behind, is, yes, let's have new elections. And what's not entirely clear is exactly how those should be structured, right? And what proposals should be put through and should win. And so people in Congress have a lot of different reasons for voting the way that they are. And this leads to another question from Robert, which says, who says, 4 years ago, that's, how's that for a little Freudian, 4 days ago. Yeah, things are how they are here. Today, 30th January, says Robert, the Congress in Peru approved that they will again discuss possibilities of moving elections into 2023. This really does feel like it was 4 years ago. One of the parties who voted against this was Peru Libre, which is the party of... so this really surprised me, says Robert, as this is the party of Pedro Castillo, and I was thinking that the majority of protests are being held by the supporters of this party. Can you please comment on this to clarify it more? Thank you. Okay, so political parties in Peru, it's chaos. It's largely chaos. There are a smaller number of really long-standing parties that have existed for, like I say, what seems like a really long time, and that could be 20 or more years. So it's not like in countries that have had the same two parties swapping back and forth for some time. Anyway, so in 2021, in the elections, there were 19 political parties with 19 presidential tickets, and so that's a whole lot. So what does that mean? It means that candidates can sometimes jump from party to party. People can change support from party to party. New parties are formed, old parties fall apart, and a lot of that kind of stuff. And Peru Libre, the pencil, that's their icon, is not a super long-standing party with deep political roots, having held lots of office lots of times. But it did win the election in 2021, in the runoff, after all of that stuff. But after Castillo took office, even many members of Peru Libre were not really backing his government and were not really playing ball with him. And this is one of the problems that the Castillo government had from the get-go, is that it was always an inexperienced party without a lot of connections and contacts to make political deals, etc. happen. So why is Peru Libre, or why might people in Peru Libre or potentially in other leftist parties be against moving up elections immediately? One big reason is that that some of the people who are in favor of it in Congress are Fuerza Popular, which is the Keiko Fujimori party, and that immediately makes leftists go, "Oh, hell no! If they're for it, we're not." And you can't trust them those are the people who wrote the neoliberal policies that brought lots of foreign investment into Peru, but also foreign ownership that people are not entirely happy with. Like there are things that have been privatized where it's worked reasonably well. There are things that have been privatized where people absolutely hate it. There are people who feel that privatization in general is bad and some things should never be privatized. And there are other people who are like, nah, free commerce, like whatever people want. And that's the deal. So I believe those are fireworks we're hearing, from the other side of town there. So I'm not too stressed about that. There's always fireworks in Cusco. So I don't think it's, major. I don't think it's a confrontation because there's no other noise going along with it. Yeah, anyway. So why is this the case? Well, so why do some people say that they're for one proposal to move elections up or not? Well, in the Constitution of 1993, which was written and drafted during the Fujimori dictatorship, the Fujimori era, that is to say, it already stipulates what kind of time frame everybody has to, what kind of time frame there is for an election. Like how long do you have to be in each different stage? At what point do you have to vet the candidates? At what point do you have to make sure that they don't have obvious other interests? At what point do you have to find out if they have criminal records or not? And is that a deal breaker? And a lot of stuff like that, right? And then how long do they get to be on the campaign trail and a lot of that kind of stuff. So that is overseen by the Board of Election Judges, the Jurado Nacional de Elecciones, and by ONPE, which is the organization that handles the election logistics. And those are two separate organizations. And one thing that has been proposed by some Congress people is, okay, well, we'll let you move up elections, but only if we get to put new people in charge of the Board of Election Judges and everybody. And the Board of Election Judges is like, no, we're here doing our job. And then Congress is like, well, we're in office. We don't want to leave. We don't, screw having more elections. And, a lot of that kind of stuff too. And so these elections would be, the elections that have been proposed so far would be elections that that are for people to finish out the remainder of the term until 2026. And so that's what that is. Some people say, well, look, we can't just go changing the Constitution willy-nilly. And then other people say, well, we need constitutional change, and we demand that there be a constitutional assembly called and referenda put forth to have the people vote on what kind of constitutional change should take place and shouldn't. And then in order to move elections up to sooner than April of 2024, we're probably actually looking at May of 2024 now, in order to move elections up sooner than that, that requires changes to the Constitution, bills that make either a constitutional exception or an actual modification to the Constitution in order to be able to have those elections on a different time frame. So this becomes complicated, where you've got some people saying, well, they only want to have a constitutional assembly because, they're illiterate peasants who think that's a good idea and they don't even know what they want it for. And then other people are like, well, listen, I may not be a law scholar or a lawyer, but I can absolutely tell you that I think there is a problem with the way that Congress can kick out the president at any point in time, and now we're on 7 presidents in 6 years, right? And so then there's people who say, well, I also think the Constitution should not allow for foreign companies to come in and run all these privatized things that are national works and nationally important and not even pay taxes on them. Like, why should somebody live in San Sebastian, a suburb of Cusco, and be paying the water bill for a water company that is operated by foreign investors? And it doesn't even, why should somebody's company from China be allowed to come in and run the water system, right, for potable water in a particular district? Like, is that okay? Some people say yes. Some people say no. Some people say, well, there wasn't enough money for us to have ever done that, like, on a governmental basis. There just was not the money to build that infrastructure, and so we needed to outsource those infrastructure projects, and we needed to open that up to international bidding. And then other people say, well, maybe if we made foreign companies pay taxes, then there would be enough money to do all this kind of stuff. So there's just so much complexity in all of this. But the bottom line right now is that even though everybody in Congress was elected in a regular, ordinary election for members of Congress and the whole thing, at this point in time, it does not appear that they care what their constituents are actually asking for. And so this becomes really melodramatic, and they are well compensated, and it is a pretty cushy gig to be in Congress and a lot of that kind of stuff. So a lot of people say, some people say that, well, they just want to keep the status quo of the Boluarte government, which is supported by the capitalist countries of the world, and especially in the Americas, to stay in power for long enough for more contracts that expire in 2023 to be signed for spans of decades, thus continuing the corruption that has been in play for some time. And other people say, well, no, we can't just go have elections at the drop of a hat and nobody knows who any of the candidates are, and we can't just change the Constitution just because there's chaos, and we can't cave to people who are marching in the streets and doing all of this kind of stuff. And then other people are like, okay, so you're just gonna do nothing in Congress while like the whole country is falling apart and is in utter chaos. And so that's kind of the situation we are in. It's tricky. And again, I'm trying to give general and fairly objective answers here without talking a lot about what, without having to go into 60 years or 200 years or 500 years of Peruvian history, because that's a whole nother story. Anyway, I think that's where we're at. Hopefully things are going to stay more or less in the status quo. Right now, Congress is meeting to debate, and I'm going to, tune that in and go take a look and see what they're saying. I don't have high hopes that they're going to say anything or vote in a way that is going to suddenly quell protests and make everything totally chill. At this moment, my sobrina has reported that she has just arrived in Ollantaytambo, so she did make it in a little under 2 hours, which is pretty good time, which means things are pretty clear right now. And anyway, I guess I'm gonna go. I'm gonna limp with my took a bad fall, bruised, aging body over to the other side of the apartment and see if I can see what the bottle rocket type noises are, presumably fireworks. It's just been San Blas, Saint Blaise, has just returned to his own church, his own home, after spending a while visiting elsewhere while renovations were conducted there. And so that has been big and going on around that area. And I can often hear, the fireworks and everything going on there. So they've got festival dancers and stuff going on up in the San Blas area right now. And here in Huanchac near the market, everybody's just staying in, watching the gas lines and that kind of thing. Oh yeah, one other really great piece of news. We got a tank of gas. Marta, my BFF, who is in charge of all the logistics at the Ollanta place, sent us one from the stash with a driver who we know who was making a nighttime run into Cusco. So he left at 3 a.m. with the tank of gas and brought it to us. So hot water for the shower. Pretty badass. Anyway, I'll check in again tomorrow and all of that kind of stuff. But don't expect to see a lot of walking around footage because I'm very limpy right now after the delightful fall down the stairs, which is not for the faint of heart. Don't do that in your 50s. Leave that for your childhood years or something. 0 of 10, do not recommend, even though I don't appear to have broken anything. So anyway, with all of that, take it easy, and I'll be back tomorrow.